welcome back to my channel. Today you are tuning in to my November wrap-up. You may be asking, Kaylin, you set up a very ambitious November TBR, literally titled it that. How did that go? Did you make your way through that? And the answer is no, definitely no. I probably accomplished less than half of that TBR. And that's okay, because sometimes books just take a little bit longer to read than you anticipate, and it's part of the process. You know, you got to enjoy the book. You can't rush it. So, am I happy with what I read? Yeah, I read 3 books in November, and I had a great time. So, yeah, let's talk about them. The first book that I read is The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This was my first Ruth Ware book, and I don't read a whole bunch of thrillers, so I'm not super learned in them. But this was my holdover from spooky season. I was reading this at the end of October, so I finished it at the beginning of November, and I really enjoyed it. This book follows a woman named Lo. I already forgot her name. It's a woman named Lo Blacklock who is a journalist, and she gets invited to go on this luxury cruise liner on its voyage. Wait, is that what it's called? Maiden voyage, that's what it's called. She gets invited to its maiden voyage, and she's actually like filling in for her boss, so she wants to do a really good job and like get a promotion or just credit for doing a good job, I guess. But she quickly gets feeling that something is off. She thinks that a murder took place on the boat, and she is trying to investigate it, and it kind of takes her back to her original motives of wanting to be an investigative journalist, so that sparks some internal debates for her as well. I thought that reading this book was a very enjoyable experience. I think it was engaging, but I wouldn't necessarily call it fast-paced. It wasn't like boom, 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 like I couldn't stop reading. But I was constantly intrigued by what was happening, and I definitely wanted to keep reading. I don't think the writing was anything special, but I would try another book from Ruth Ware and see how I feel about that. My main gripe with this book that I do have is I don't think that the end was very shocking. No spoilers, of course, but I mean, it's not that I particularly saw it coming, but I guess I did. It just felt like the most obvious conclusion to the book, and I thought it was going to do something different, and it didn't. Maybe I just had thoroughly thought out every situation that could possibly happen, and I wasn't surprised at all by it, but I don't know. So maybe it's my own fault that it wasn't surprising and that it didn't, hook me at the end. But it was a satisfying conclusion. I really enjoyed the last chapter and the last lines in particular. Good stuff. So as a thriller, yes, you could say that this book did thrill me in some ways. So mission accomplished, I guess. Next, I read The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This book is all the rage right now, and recently, I mean, as it should be. I don't think that the hype is undeserved. I think that the book got a lot of buzz, and it delivered on the buzz. It took off. It was good. This book follows a third-year biology grad student named Olive, and she is trying to convince her best friend that she is totally over this guy that she dated for a short period of time, because her best friend wants to date this guy. And to do this, she basically lies to her and tells her that she's on a date, and then her friend sees her in the lab not on a date, so she kisses the first person that she sees, who happens to be a grumpy professor named Adam, who is, yes, definitely modeled after Adam Driver, and every description of him will remind you of that. Personally, I wasn't mad about that, though, so if that's a thing that would bother you, then I guess let it be known, but I was fine with it. And hence, there is a fake dating relationship that ensues with these two characters. This book did apparently start out as Star Wars fan fiction between Kylo and Rey. And I can see it with Adam, obviously, but personally, I don't think Olive is like a dead ringer for Rey. Maybe on the cover she looks like it, but like the description didn't particularly make me think of Rey. I thought Olive stood on her own as a really strong character. This book gripped me. When I tell you I could not put this down, I only read 3 books this month, but I read this one in like 3 days. I was actually reading it on my lunch break at work, and the sprinklers went off while I was reading it, so tells you how much I was paying attention to this book and not the sprinklers going off. So yeah, we have a bit of water damage going on there. But Aside from the fact that this book was wildly entertaining and I couldn't stop reading it, I think it offered some really, really good representation in here for, one, women in STEM, which I haven't seen in romance ever. Another thing that I haven't seen in romance, demisexuality being really well represented with Olive. So this book ticked a lot of boxes for me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I 100% agree with the hype. Is it my favorite romance book I've ever read? No, but is it fantastic? I think so, and I would definitely read anything else that Ali Hazelwood comes out with. I have heard some put down of the smut scene in this book, and while I read it, I didn't have much trouble with it. I thought it was fine. It delivered what it was supposed to deliver. I do agree with the criticisms. I think that some of the lines were a little bit shocking, maybe not quite realistic, but considering there was only one smut scene, I think that this book was great, and you know, we can all get over that small gripe and understand that as a whole, riveting. This book was riveting. Finally, I read A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab, and this is the one that really took me a lot longer to read than I expected. Granted, it is a chunk. It is definitely a chunky book, but I think I spent like 2 or 2.5 weeks reading this, and that's okay. You know, sometimes books just take a bit longer to get through. Sometimes you have to wait for the audiobook to come in from the library to push you through it, but this is the second book in the Shades of Magic trilogy. The first book is A Darker Shade of Magic, and I've really, really enjoyed this series so far. I'm currently reading the third book, and it's just a very inventive world where there's parallel Londons with varying levels of magic, and the characters are so strong. The dialogue and the banter is incredible. That being said, I wasn't a huge fan of the pacing in this second book. I think that a lot of what drives this series is the banter between Lila and Kel specifically, and some other characters as well. And yes, there were characters introduced in this book that kind of took the place of that a little bit, but because Lila and Kel are not together for the majority of this book, it was a little bit slow. It was a little slow. There's also a tournament taking place in this book, the Essentosh, and once the tournament was actually taking place, it was really fun, and I thought it was a great time to read that. It was really cool to see matchups of characters just kind of dueling with their magic and seeing who would take over, who was the real boss. You know, I mean, all the characters are bosses, but like, who's the superior boss? That was fun. But I think that the build up to the tournament was a bit lengthy, a bit unnecessary. I think it could have been shortened a little bit. So all in all, this book is the Goblet of Fire of this trilogy. It was fun, introduced some major, slightly dark plot points towards the end of the story, but it was just fun fluff for most of it, and I liked it. So yeah, those are the books that I read in November. Who knows what I'll finish out this year with, hopefully some good stuff. I'm currently, like I said, reading A Conjuring of Light, and I'm about halfway through it, so I will finish this before the year ends. Mark my words, I will finish it. And I'm also currently reading a collection of poems by Emily Dickinson, collected poems of Emily Dickinson, and enjoying it so far. I think I'm kind of hit or miss with her poems. I'm kind of really liking more of the ones that have to do with nature, but it's a fun experience, and I'm delving into a classic poet and seeing how I feel about it. So it's a good journey. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.